For thousands of years, the world believed ancient Egypt was isolated, one kingdom, one people, one royal bloodline. The pyramids stood as proof. But then something changed. Scientists extracted DNA from Egyptian mummies, and what they found shocked everyone, because hidden inside those ancient remains was a genetic story no one expected. A story of migrations, disappearances, foreign bloodlines, and missing ancestry. Some DNA matched nearby kingdoms, some matched people thousands of kilometers away. And some samples raised a terrifying possibility. What if the Egypt we imagined never truly existed? One question suddenly became impossible to ignore. Who were the ancient Egyptians? Really? The answer would begin inside the desert, beneath layers of burning sand, inside tombs sealed for over 2,000 years. For decades, Egypt was treated like a civilization, separate from the rest of humanity. Textbooks showed the pyramids rising alone beside the Nile. Pharaohs appeared almost mythical, untouchable, disconnected from the outside world. But history is rarely that clean. Trade routes crossed Egypt long before Rome existed. Armies invaded its borders again and again. Persians came, Greeks came, Romans came. Arab dynasties followed centuries later. Every empire left something behind: language, religion, architecture, and maybe blood. This is where the story gets strange, because for most of modern history, scientists could not test ancient Egyptian DNA properly. The climate destroyed organic material quickly. Heat damaged the samples. Humidity contaminated the remains. Many researchers believed usable DNA from mummies was impossible to recover. That idea survived for years. Then new technology arrived. Tiny fragments suddenly became readable. And hidden inside those fragments was evidence no one expected. What came next? The first major breakthrough happened quietly. No dramatic announcement, no worldwide headlines. Just scientists inside sterile laboratories studying bones and teeth from ancient Egyptian buried channels. Please like this video and subscribe our channel. Some remains belong to nobles. Some belong to ordinary people, all buried near the Nile. The researchers expected a simple result: a clear genetic line connecting ancient Egyptians directly to modern populations. Instead, the data became more confusing with every test. Certain ancient samples showed strong links to populations from the East Mediterranean. Others connected closely to the Levant. Modern Egyptians, however, carried additional ancestry that appeared later. Sub-Saharan African ancestry increased over time. The shift was real, measured operable, and that raised dangerous questions. What changed Egypt's population so dramatically? Wars, migration, slavery, trade routes, or something larger hidden beneath official history? No one agreed, and that question has never been fully answered. The deeper researchers looked, the stranger the timeline became. Ancient Egypt lasted over 3,000 years. That is longer than most civilizations survive. Dynasties rose and vanished. Kings erased rival kings from monuments. Entire cities disappeared beneath sandstorms. Even the language evolved. But the DNA revealed something else. Movement. Constant movement. Egypt was never isolated. It was connected to Africa, connected to the Middle East, connected to the Mediterranean world, a crossroads disguised as an empire, and the Nile made it possible. Every year, the river flooded the land. It turned desert into farmland. Villages expanded along its banks. Merchants traveled its waters, carrying gold, ivory, grain, incense, and slaves. Egypt became rich because everyone passed through it. And when people move, DNA moves too. That should not have surprised anyone. But it did, because the myth of a genetically untouched Egypt had already become deeply rooted. People wanted ancient Egypt to belong to one clear identity, one origin, one race. History refused to cooperate. The evidence became even harder to ignore after researchers studied mummies from Abu Sir el-Malek, a burial site south of Cairo. The tombs covered multiple periods of Egyptian history. Researchers extracted DNA from dozens of remains. The results stunned the scientific community. The ancient individuals showed closer genetic ties to Near Eastern populations than modern Egyptians do today. That did not mean ancient Egyptians were foreign. It meant Egypt was always part of a larger human network, a blending point between continents, but many people misunderstood the findings instantly. Online debates exploded. Some twisted the science for politics, others rejected the data completely, but the real story was far more complicated because genetics does not erase culture. DNA cannot explain pyramids. It cannot explain religion. It cannot explain why millions obeyed god kings buried beneath mountains of stone. Culture built Egypt, but genetics revealed who passed through its gates. And those gates never truly closed. Then came another mystery. The royal bloodlines. For centuries, historians believed pharaoh families protected their lineage obsessively. Some married siblings. Others married cousins. The goal was purity, preservation, divine blood, but the DNA told a darker story. Repeated inbreeding damaged royal families severely. Several mummies showed signs of genetic disorders, weak immune systems, bone deformities, physical disabilities. King Tutankhamun became the most famous example. His body revealed horrifying health problems. A damaged foot, possible malaria infections, fragile bones. His bloodline had been collapsing from inside, yet Egypt hid it beneath gold masks and divine myths. The pharaohs presented themselves as gods. The DNA showed they were painfully human, and that discovery changed everything. Because once science stripped away the mythology, a terrifying possibility emerged. How much of Egypt's history was carefully manufactured? How many stories were propaganda carved into stone? Pharaohs controlled records, they erased enemies, dyed rival names, rewrote victories. If they manipulated history openly, what else disappeared? No one expected what came next. Researchers started comparing Egyptian DNA across centuries. Parts emerged slowly. Certain periods showed stronger foreign influence, especially during invasions and occupations. The Hyksos period became especially controversial. The Hyksos were outsiders who ruled northern Egypt for over a century. Ancient Egyptian texts described them almost like invaders from another world. Violent, foreign, unwanted. But archaeology revealed something more complicated. The transition appeared gradual in some regions, not a sudden conquest. People from Western Asia had likely been living in Egypt long before the Hyksos took power. Trade became settlement, settlement became influence, influence became rule. And suddenly the line between Egyptian and foreign became impossible to define. This is where the story gets strange, because civilizations often create simple identities after periods of chaos. They simplify the past, they erase complexity. That ancient Egypt did exactly that, and modern people inherited the myth: one people, one bloodline, one eternal civilization. But real history looked different. Messier Human, the Nile did not separate worlds, it connected them, and every invasion left fingerprints inside the population. Persians, Greeks, Romans, Arabs, Ottomans. Each period layered new ancestry onto older foundations. Modern Egypt became a living archive of migrations, but beneath all those layers, the ancient DNA still survived, waiting inside broken teeth. Inside preserved bones, inside tombs untouched for centuries. Scientists only needed the tools to read it, and once they did, history became impossible to simplify again. Then came the most unsettling question of all. What if we still have not found the original Egyptians? Because the oldest dynasties appeared suddenly, too suddenly. Advanced architecture, complex religion, centralized government, massive monuments, writing systems, all emerging with shocking speed. Historians call it the rise of dynastic Egypt. But some researchers quietly wondered whether earlier migration shaped the civilization before history officially began. Small population movements, ancient mixing events. Forgotten groups absorbed into the kingdom long before pyramids existed. The DNA hints at deep ancestry stretching far beyond Egypt itself, North Africa, the Levant. Possibly deeper African populations now lost to time, but ancient DNA remains incomplete. Too many samples are damaged, too many regions remain untested. Large parts of Egypt still hide beneath modern cities or unexplored desert. The full picture remains buried, and that uncertainty created a new kind of mystery, not who built Egypt, but who disappeared from its story completely, because every civilization leaves ghosts behind, unrecorded workers, forgotten tribes, absorbed populations. People erased from monuments but preserved genetically through descendants. The pyramids still stand, the temples still stand, but the people themselves became harder to trace. Their faces faded, their language transformed, their bloodlines scattered across centuries of conquest, and somewhere beneath the sand, more answers are waiting, sealed tombs still untouched, mummies still wrapped in linen. DNA still hidden inside ancient cells. Science opened the first door, but only the first. Everything pointed toward one conclusion. Ancient Egypt was never isolated, never genetically pure, never frozen in time. It was alive, connected, changing constantly. One of history's greatest crossroads that seemed to answer the mystery, one clean explanation. But there was one problem nobody expected. One burial uncovered later, one mummy hidden among ordinary remains, one genetic signature that did not match the others at all. And that discovery changed the entire investigation. Everyone believed the mystery was solved. Ancient Egypt was a crossroads, a civilization shaped by migration, conquest, and thousands of years of human movement. The DNA seemed to confirm it, case closed. But then something changed. Researchers discovered one genetic profile that did not fit the pattern. One individual buried among ordinary Egyptians, one body hidden beneath layers of dust and limestone. At first, nobody noticed anything unusual. The tomb was small, poorly decorated, no gold, no royal symbols, no famous name, just another burial in the endless Egyptian desert. But the DNA told a different story, and what they found shocked everyone, because this individual carried ancestry unlike the others nearby, older, rarer, almost disconnected from later Egyptian populations. For a moment, scientists wondered if contamination had ruined the sample. Ancient DNA research is fragile. One mistake changes everything. Modern skin cells, breathing near the remains, improper handling. Any contamination could destroy years of work, so they tested again and again. The results stayed the same. No one expected what came next. The deeper analysis suggested this ancestry traced back to populations connected to prehistoric North Africa, groups that existed before dynastic Egypt, before pyramids, before pharaohs, possibly before recorded history along the Nile itself. This is where the story gets strange, because the origins of ancient Egypt remain one of archaeology's biggest unanswered questions. Civilizations usually evolve gradually. Villages become towns, towns become kingdoms, kingdoms become empires. But Egypt appeared almost fully formed: writing, religion, monumental architecture, political organization, all emerging rapidly around the same period. Historians spent decades debating why. Some believed climate change pushed populations toward the Nile. Others argued outside influence accelerated development, trade networks, migration routes, technological exchange, but DNA introduced another possibility. What if ancient Egypt was built from multiple forgotten populations merging together long before recorded history began? Not one origin. Several leaded over thousands of years. And that possibility changed the investigation completely. Researchers expanded their comparisons. They looked beyond Egypt, ancient Levantine populations, North African remains, Mediterranean burials. Even prehistoric samples from the Sahara, parsed, slowly emerged. Before the Sahara became a desert, it was green. Rivers crossed the land, Animals thrived there, humans settled there for thousands of years. Then the climate shifted, the land dried, lakes vanished, entire populations moved eastward toward the Nile Valley, and that movement may have helped shape the foundations of Egypt itself. The desert that protects Egypt's secrets today may have created Egypt in the first place, and that question has never been fully answered. The evidence grew stranger with every discovery. Rock art deep in the Sahara showed cattle rituals resembling later Egyptian traditions. Ancient burials revealed cultural similarities. Even early religious symbols appeared connected, not identical. But connected, fragments of older worlds surviving inside Egypt's civilization. Yes, Egypt became unique, but it may have inherited pieces from societies now erased completely. Civilizations forgotten by history, swallowed by desert sands, and if those people vanished physically, their DNA did not. It survived silently inside later populations. Inside bloodlines, nobody noticed until modern science arrived. Then came another disturbing realization. Ancient Egypt's population may have changed repeatedly through crisis. Droughts, famines, invasions. Disease outbreaks, periods of collapse, every catastrophe reshaped the people living there. And Egypt suffered many collapses, the end of the Old Kingdom, the collapse of the Bronze Age world. Foreign occupations, civil wars, each disaster opened the gates for migrations. Some people fled, others arrived. Entire communities disappeared from records forever. But genetics remembers what monuments erase. That became the terrifying power of DNA research. Stone can lie, kings can rewrite victories, empires can destroy records. But human cells preserve history quietly, generation after generation. Long after names disappear, scientists studying Egyptian remains began noticing something else. Certain regions of Egypt differed genetically from others. Northern Egypt showed stronger Mediterranean and Near Eastern connections. Southern Egypt carried deeper African ancestry. That should not have been surprising geographically. Egypt stretches across enormous distances. But politically, the kingdom presented itself as unified, one throne, one divine ruler, one civilization. The DNA showed something more complex beneath the surface. Different communities mixing slowly over centuries, different histories existing inside one empire. And still, modern arguments tried forcing Egypt into simple categories: African, Middle Eastern, Mediterranean. But ancient populations rarely obey modern identities. The ancient world was fluid. Trade ships crossed seas constantly. Caravans crossed deserts. Mercenaries served foreign kings. Slaves were transported between continents. Priests traveled. Merchants settled abroad. Human movement never stopped, and Egypt sat directly in the center of those routes. That is why the DNA became so politically explosive. People wanted certainty. The science revealed complexity instead. No one expected what came next. Researchers started examining disease patterns preserved in ancient remains. And hidden inside several mummies was evidence of infections still affecting humanity today. Tuberculosis, malaria, parasitic diseases. Ancient Egypt was not only connected by trade, it was connected biologically. Pathogens traveled with people. Empires spread sickness alongside culture. The Nile carried life, but also death, and that changes how we imagine ancient civilizations, not isolated kingdoms frozen in time, but living systems constantly interacting with the wider world. Then another discovery emerged from royal tomb studies. Several pharaohs may not have been biologically related exactly as official records claimed. Some family connections remain uncertain even today. Royal succession was messy. Adoptions occurred. Political marriages shifted bloodlines. Records contradicted one another. And in some cases, DNA complicated established histories further. The deeper scientists looked, the less stable Egypt's official narrative became not false, but incomplete, carefully curated, built by rulers obsessed with immortality. Pharaohs did not simply rule Egypt. They controlled memory itself. Temple walls celebrated victories while hiding defeats. Enemies vanished from inscriptions. Failed rulers disappeared entirely. History became propaganda carved into stone. But DNA could not be censored, and that frightens some historians deeply, because once biology enters the conversation, ancient myths become measurable, testable, vulnerable. This is where the story gets strange. Some of the most important Egyptian remains are still inaccessible. Political restrictions, preservation concerns, religious sensitivities, national identity debates. Many mummies remain untested. Many tombs remain unopened. The full genetic history of Egypt does not exist yet. We are still looking at fragments, tiny windows into a civilization spanning thousands of years. And those fragments already shattered decades of assumptions. Imagine what future discoveries might reveal: a hidden royal lineage, a forgotten migration, an erased dynasty, an ancestry nobody predicted. The possibility still hangs over archaeology like a shadow, especially beneath the Valley of the Kings, because many experts quietly believe major discoveries remain buried there, untouched chambers. Collapsed tunnels, sealed tombs hidden behind stone walls. Egypt continues hiding its dead carefully. It always has, and sometimes the dead return with answers nobody wanted. That is exactly what happened with Tutankhamun. For decades, the boy king appeared almost symbolic, a fragile ruler buried beneath impossible wealth, gold masks, jewels, chariots. Treasures beyond imagination, but science transformed him into something else, a genetic warning. His DNA revealed generations of inbreeding within the royal family. The divine bloodline was weakening itself deliberately. The pharaohs believed purity protected power. Instead, it may have destroyed them slowly. That changes the symbolism of the tomb entirely. The treasures no longer represent perfection. They represent fear, a dynasty desperately preserving itself against collapse. And collapse eventually came. Egypt's power faded. Foreign rulers took control repeatedly. Its religion weakened, its language transformed, its ancient gods disappeared. But the people survived. That may be the most important truth in this entire story. Civilizations fall, humans continue. Modern Egyptians are not disconnected from ancient Egypt, but neither are they unchanged copies of the past. No population stays frozen for thousands of years. Human history does not work that way. Migration changes people, trade changes people, war changes people, time changes everyone. And Egypt experienced all of it. That reality frustrates people searching for simple answers. But reality rarely cares about simplicity. The pyramids still rise above the desert, silent, massive, watching over layers of forgotten humanity beneath them. Workers, farmers, priests, soldiers, foreign traders, captives, royal bloodlines, lost tribes. All absorbed into the civilization history now calls ancient Egypt, and somewhere inside modern populations. Pieces of them still survive. That is the true reveal hidden inside the DNA, not one lost race. Not one hidden secret, something far more human. Ancient Egypt was built by generations of movement and survival. A civilization shaped by countless lives crossing the Nile over thousands of years. Some stayed willingly, some arrived through conquest, some disappeared completely. But together, they created one of history's greatest civilizations. And for centuries, the monuments distracted us from the people themselves. The statues looked eternal. The bloodlines were not. That truth matters today more than many realize, because identity is powerful. People want ownership of the past. They want clean origins, civil ancestry, definite answers. Egypt refuses all of that. Its history belongs to movement, to mixing, to adaptation. And maybe that is why the civilization lasted so long. It absorbed influence instead of resisting it completely. Ideas flowed through Egypt constantly. Religion evolved, art changed, language shifted. Even the gods transformed over centuries. Nothing remained frozen, not even the people buried beneath the sand, and that realization carries something strangely emotional. Because those ancient individuals were never symbols to themselves. They were human beings, pack-cleansed children, workers, lovers, survivors, people who feared disease. People who buried their families beside the Nile, people who believed the afterlife waited beyond death. Now their DNA speaks centuries later, quickly, without monuments, without kings, without propaganda. Just biology surviving against impossible odds, a few surviving cells carrying echoes of forgotten worlds, and maybe that is the eerie part. Not that science uncovered lost ancestry, but that pieces of ancient lives still exist physically inside living humans today. The empire ended, the people did not, their language faded, their temples collapsed, their gods vanished into mythology. But their descendants continued walking the earth, changed by time, changed by history, yet still connected to those ancient burials through invisible genetic threads. And somewhere right now, beneath Egypt's desert, another sealed tomb still waits unopened, another skeleton still carries a story nobody expects, another fragment of DNA still sleeps in darkness, waiting for someone to ask the right question. We just haven't found it yet.